Yo! We're the Boros Twins.
This is God's gift to wrestling, Michael Richard Blaze.
This is Chelsea Green.
I'm the world's sweetest man, Gentleman Jarvis.
We are Jack Pride.
This is the innovator of violence, the first lady of hardcore, the most violent woman in professional wrestling.
This is Christian Cobain.
This is Casey Two Scoops Spinelli.
Oh, hi, darlings. It's me, your punkin' weirdo hero, Ravenous Randy Myers.
This is Holden Albright.
And we love wrestling.
And I love wrestling.
And I love wrestling.
And I love wrestling.
And we love wrestling. And I love wrestling.
And I love wrestling.
And I love wrestling.
Oh, we're going to see a Superflex Powerball!
Just coming up to the building, Colton Kelly. Colton, I am sorry to interrupt your cigarette, my friend.
I am so excited to have you here. I know I said that a million times before we got started. This crowd is going bananas!
I'm Spencer Love, and this is Love Wrestling.
Hello, friends. Good morning, and welcome to this edition of Love Wrestling Sunday Brunch. Spencer Love here, coffee in hand, and joined by two of my favorite people, two of your hopefully favorite people in the week that we've launched in Love Wrestling history. Mighty Joe Moore and Chris Parrish and myself here this morning to chat wrestling, answer your questions, and let you guys know what you can expect in the next little bit on Love Wrestling. Gentlemen, I'll say hello to you first in a second, but before we do that, got to say hello to our friend Eric. He's back in the chat room saying hello, joining us for this morning's edition of Sunday Brunch. Eric, good to see you. Of course, buddy, if you've got any questions as well as anybody else here in the chat room today, let us know. We've got a couple of topics in mind, but more importantly, if you guys have a couple of topics in mind, let us know. We're here to chat wrestling, and in between, punctuate it with what you guys can learn to love and expect here in the near future right here on Love Wrestling. If you haven't subscribed, give us a like, a share, a follow, a retweet, a review, however you choose to support. It does help us continue to bring you some of the best in professional wrestling, including my two friends with me here today. Joe, how you doing, man? It's been a week. It's been a while. How are things over on your side of things?
It has been a very busy week for Mighty Joe over here in Southern Ontario, Canada. Watching Wrestle Kingdom, doing another episode of Turnbuckle Rewind, Turnbuckle Talk. I was actually just yesterday recording an episode of Destino, a New Japan Pro Wrestling podcast with our friend Michael Jargo. Dude, I've been busy, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I love talking about wrestling.
Absolutely, man. And I know for you specifically, we're going to dive into it in a few minutes here, but Wrestle Kingdom taking place over a couple of days as who I would call our resident New Japan fan here on Love Wrestling. I'm going to pick your brain in a couple of minutes here, but first we got to say hello to my partner in crime, a longtime friend of mine, sometimes. Chris Parrish, how you doing, man? Good to see you.
I like turtles. No, I'm doing well. Anyone's gonna get you. No, I'm doing good, man. I'm looking really forward to the Rumble. Anytime the new year hits, it's kind of like, oh man, the Rumble's very much on the way. Like Joe said, Wrestle Kingdom happened. Haven't checked it out yet. Will though, so don't give me any more crap, please, there, Joe. Time is.
Go watch it. Go watch it.
Yeah, I will. And football starts. Playoffs, real football playoff starts. The main event on. Go Saints, do that.
Hey, Parrish, I got to throw you under the bus a little bit, buddy. I've tuned out completely to football since I won our fantasy football league. But
but your team lost yesterday. That's why you're tuned out.
That's exactly why I'm tuned out. But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Joe, like I said, we'll touch on it in a second here, but maybe you can give a couple of quick thoughts on Wrestle Kingdom, because Eric's hopping in the comment section already saying, I just watched New Japan Pro Wrestling Wrestle Kingdom 15 night one yesterday. That main event was fire. Now, I have to fully admit to you, Eric, I'm not as caught up on the entire event as I maybe should be when I'm hosting a live show. But Joe, maybe give us your thoughts on night one specifically. I don't want to give any spoilers for night two if Eric hasn't watched it yet.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, both nights were absolutely fantastic, but night one, you're right. That main event, Kota Ibushi versus Tetsuya Naito for both the IWGP Intercontinental title and the Heavyweight Championship match that went just over 30 minutes. And whenever these two gentlemen are in the ring, they are attempting to murder each other. I mean, I lost track of how many times each guy literally got spiked on their head in different points in the match. I mean, oh my God.
One clip I've watched, because traditionalist maybe isn't the right word, but like I want to sit down and watch a full match, so I try and avoid as many clips and that sort of shit as you can. But the one I saw, that Frankensteiner off the apron to the floor, like, what? Like, how people can do that to themselves, man. And it's why, like, I am always the first to qualify in any interview I do. Like, I have never professionally wrestled. I have never amateurly wrestled. I have never done anything of that nature, man. You look at shit like that and you've got to respect what anybody who chooses to step in the ring does, right?
And then the other thing too, when tables get involved in a Japanese wrestling match, for those who've watched Botchamania and seen the I am the table shtick that they do, I mean, I am the Japanese table. Those Japanese tables, oh my God, those are some stiff freaking tables. Let's put it that way.
Oh man, it's absolutely nuts. Like you say, it's, and we talked about it last week on the show, but pro wrestling right now is very much a very good buffet, right? Like New Japan sort of gives you more, because there are differences in every match, in every promotion, but they give you more of like that hard hitting sort of strong style. They use as many cliches as I can in one sentence, right? WWE, to their benefit and their detriment sometimes, is your true sports entertainment program. AEW, I think, is starting to do a really good job of trying to mix the best of both worlds, but that's a discussion for a little later on. Parrish, I wanted to pick your brain on a comment you made there a couple of seconds into the show. The Royal Rumble, we've got that coming up in a couple of weeks here, January 31st. I believe we're 3 weeks away, if my math's correct today. And I just put out an article actually this morning detailing some of my picks for the Rumble. If you guys want to check that full thing out, it is on lovewrestling.ca. But I wanted to get both of your guys' thoughts on a couple of your potential winners for each Royal Rumble, whether, no, let's limit it. Let's limit it to 2 picks each, because you can sort of give your heavy favorite and your dark horse for both the men and women's Royal Rumbles coming up. Parrish, we'll start with you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think what you saw on SmackDown was actually pretty telling on who they feel they're going to be protecting in that Rumble to make sure that they're favorites. Like a guy like Shinsuke and Daniel Bryan, you saw were very protected on SmackDown. And it makes me wonder if Daniel Bryan really is that odds-on favorite to win the Rumble for the men's this year. I think they want to give it to somebody who hasn't won it before. I think they're 8 years too late on giving it to Daniel Bryan. I don't really have that. I'm behind Daniel Bryan like I was 8 years ago. But I think they do have a tendency of giving it to the guys that have been there for a while when they're kind of unsure on what they want. And I do think they do want Roman Reigns with Daniel Bryan at WrestleMania, because I don't think Rock or Goldberg is a potential suitor for Roman Reigns. And for the women, I think it's more wide open, but I will love to see Bayley win it. And I would love to see Bayley. Man. I would love to see Bayley then transfer to Raw and wrestle Asuka for the Raw Women's title at WrestleMania.
Yeah, that's one that, like, despite how the Golden Role Models versus Asuka and the Kabuki Warriors feud went for the better part of the year, Bayley and Asuka to me still feels like a really fresh matchup.
Yeah.
You know, like there weren't really a ton of one-on-one interactions between the two. I know that they did have a couple of matches, but did we really see that true barn burner of a match from them? Well, yes, but I do still think they've got another level to take it to, right? Joe, before I move to you, I want you to answer this question as part of your answer. Parrish talks about the Women's Royal Rumble being one of the most wide open ever. For me, I completely agree, and I agree on the men's side of it that it's super wide open. Yeah. Is this maybe one of the most unpredictable Rumbles in recent memory? Because at least over the last few years for me, it seems like you could have narrowed it down pretty realistically to 1 or 2 people for each side of things.
Well, to give people a little bit of context here for myself, since some of you might be seeing me and hearing from me the first time, the Royal Rumble is actually my favorite WWE event / match of the year. So I've always dig the surprises, and it's been a little while since we've had some good legitimate surprises, and I'm expecting a little bit of that this year. So what I'll do is give my like a winner and then a surprise for both the men's and the women's. So starting with the men's, I'm predicting a winner Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar is going to come in. He's going to come in, I think, mid to late in the match, and is just going to destroy. And he's going to pick who he's going to target afterwards. For a surprise entrant, it's going to sound a little nutty, but I'm going to say Marty Scurll is going to show up and kind of have maybe a little bit of that AJ Styles kind of moment. There's a good number of fans who know who Marty is, so I think Marty can make a bit of a splash in the Rumble. So I'll be looking forward to that. For the women's, my pick is Charlotte to win the Royal Rumble this year. And for a surprise entrant, that's a little tougher because I mean, in WWE, they have a good number of very talented women there. But if I had to pick a surprise, I'm going to say Tessa Blanchard can show up. And, she's been very, very quiet as of late. And obviously there's somebody that WWE would be interested in and add to an already stacked women division over there. So I think, Tessa is kind of a surprise entrant that I think people aren't expecting.
Absolutely. Before I hop into mine, we're going to touch on it real quick. Eric, I know that Joe's going to bring you some great New Japan stuff a little later on in the show here. So just really quickly, Ospreay versus Okada was another great match at New Japan's Wrestle Kingdom. Honestly, all matches have been good to watch. Man, at least from what I've watched of it, I couldn't agree with you more. I know Joe agrees with you. Parrish, I think you're in the same boat as far as I go as far as New Japan. We haven't watched a ton of it enough to make a true reasoned decision here. Let's also hop in and give some love to Siobhan tuning in this morning. Nice to see you, good friend. She says, yes, we want Bayley. Absolutely. Show some respect. Put some respect on that name. I couldn't agree more. And I don't think that Bayley's my true prediction for winner this year. I could definitely see them going the Bayley route, especially over the last couple of months. Has she been as hot as she was for the first few months of 2020? Not the first 3 quarters, arguably, of 2020. I don't think so. She did go on a losing streak from October until that win over Bianca Belair at the end of November. So I could see them starting to heat her back up and then really establish her as a true force again after a bit of a downtime with the Rumble win. But my pick this year is someone who is already a surprise return as far as I'm concerned. I've got Sonya Deville at the top of my list. I think that her work with Mandy Rose is some of the best women's work that not just WWE, but women's wrestling has done over long-term storytelling. As far as long-term storytelling goes for a promotion, they were fantastic, man. That entire feud was just such a fantastic piece of sports entertainment. I use that as a true compliment as far as it goes. I think they did absolutely fantastically. And if it wasn't for Sonya Deville sort of having that situation happen, I think that they would have continued to do great work even past that SummerSlam match. They had the no DQ loser leaves WWE match. I think she's fantastic. I think that bringing her back and already presenting her in a prominent role, whether it's as Adam Pearce's right-hand woman, whether it's as an authority figure over the women's division, whatever they're presenting her as right now, I think that she's not only going to enter the Rumble, I think that she is someone that could really, really benefit from winning it. I think she's someone who, again, a lot in the way that Drew McIntyre was last year, just right place, right time. She did great work. She's really been built up. She is someone who, winning a Rumble, for lack of a better way to put it, they've elevated people very, very quickly before where it seems almost unrealistic. I think I don't mean this as a shot because he genuinely is one of my favorite pro wrestlers. But when Jinder Mahal won the championship in 2017, I think a lot of people in WWE, the WWE universe, saw that as a bit of an unrealistic jump. I don't think that's fair, but we'll leave that for another day. I think that if Sonya Deville was to win the Royal Rumble, maybe she doesn't have the resume of someone like a Bayley or a Charlotte Flair, but she's someone who could feasibly win the Royal Rumble if it's presented correctly, So I've got her as my dark horse pick to win it, or my pick to win it, excuse me. My dark horse pick to win it, I've got Shotzi Blackheart, and I'm going real dark horse as far as that goes, but you really want to have someone presented as a breakout star. She had a 2020. I think personally, if there were crowds in attendance, she would have had a 2020 that almost eclipsed Rhea Ripley's, arguably has eclipsed some of the runs that a lot of prominent individuals in NXT have had. And to be quite honest, like the only reason I wouldn't have her higher up on my list to actually, not be a dark horse, be a favorite to win it, is the lack of crowds and is that lack of reception that she has had for the majority of the year strictly due to the coronavirus, right? Yeah. She could enter. She did great in the Rumble last year. People loved her. People love her in NXT right now. You'll find nary a bad word about her work, her personality, her charisma as far as it goes. If she were to win it, I think that would be a true shocker, but something that I would be real happy to see. Before I move on to the men, got to hop in there for Eric Graves as well. He says the women's Rumble, Alexa Bliss. Let's get your guys' thoughts on that, because he says dark horse is Sonya Deville, but I would have a lot of time for Alexa Bliss as the Rumble winner this year, especially if for whatever reason the Fiend hadn't reappeared by that point.
Yeah. You go ahead on that, Perry. No, you go ahead first.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Well, first off, Spencer, we've talked about my thought of Alexa Bliss winning. The only reason why I'm kind of swaying away from that is I actually believe right now a Rumble win for Alexa Bliss into a championship title isn't something that she really needs at this point. I don't think it makes her character any better or more. The storyline that they have going with her, the fact that she is the only female who really is interacting with male wrestlers right now on an every week basis with Randy Orton, I think that shows how much trust and how much she has actually just stepped out as a performer right now. I think her mic work is probably one of the best for women.
No doubt in my mind.
And I'm even going to say she's better than 90% of the guys. And that's just because she can play the character well. We always looked at Alexa Bliss as being that snotty bitch a little bit.
Dude, anything she does, she buys into 110%.
Yeah.
Whether it's even the cheerleader gimmick that she first came in with, whether or not it got over in the traditional sense, you could tell she was committed as all hell to it, right?
Yeah, and then it's just one of those things where you can tell the company's behind her. But when it comes to the Rumble, I just don't think it's feasible for her to win a traditional wrestling match under those realms. And that's why I'm kind of shying away. Kind of the same thing with Bray Wyatt. I just don't think they're going to be looked at on WrestleMania as championship competitors, and more as a specialty match, kind of like what Taker was. I think that's what we're going to see a little bit more. I could be wrong. But went on. I also want to make sure we give a shout out to the creator of
this Tuesday here on Love Wrestling. So stay tuned for that after the break, after Joe's answer, after my answer, after a couple more minutes here, friends. We're going to hit that exclusive, and then we're going to talk a lot more about the Royal Rumble. So stay tuned right here on Love's Wrestling's Sunday Brunch. Joe, Alexa Bliss as a Royal Rumble winner. Do you buy it? Do you not? Are you a fan or are you not?
I've always been a fan. My question: you guys have been watching a lot more of the weekly WWE program than I have been. Did they not recently essentially burn her to death, or essentially kind of murder her? Now, how do you come back from that in a believable? She then have to come back in an undead kind of character, right? To make that.
So they ended it on a cliffhanger, and personally, I didn't like the way that they approached it the next week. Yeah. I thought the story was fantastic to close out Raw 2 weeks ago. I think 3 weeks ago, potentially at this. Either way, I thought it was fantastic, but I feel like, number one, it was weird to open the show with Hulk Hogan advertising a phone after having that as your cliffhanger. But they did explain later on in the show, Randy Orton, the gist of it was essentially that he didn't do it, he couldn't do it, but he wanted to do it.
Yeah.
So as of this point, because again, I said it on Twitter, I completely missed that promo, to be quite honest with you. So I admittedly may have missed something with Alexa Bliss on that end, but I don't believe there was any appearance or anything along those lines. And for me, it sounds like such a cliche way to put it, but in the world of WWE where anything can happen, for me, even if it's something as simple as a supernatural explanation, I watched The Undertaker shoot lightning from his hands for years and was entertained every time, right? So if it just comes out, there needs to be an explanation. I can't just, for example, have, Alexa Bliss or Bray Wyatt show up the next week as though nothing had happened. There needs to even be, sounds silly to say, but realistically, knowing the two characters involved, you could play it off as like something the Wyatt Swamp revitalized us or whatever the hell it may be, right? Like
a reincarnation. Yeah.
You can do anything as long as you pay it off with something so small. That was always my issue with Bobby Lashley coming back up until the last 6 months. Not one time did he ever explain why he came back to WWE in the context of programming. Neither here nor there.
Yeah.
So to come back.
Yeah. But with Alexa Bliss, I mean, I love her as a talent. Just I look at her compared to other people in the match, and one big one, literally physically, that stands out to me if she's going to be involved in the match is Nia Jax. Right? When you put somebody with like Alexa Bliss, and there was somebody as dangerous as Nia Jax is, and I mean dangerous as in she hurts her opponents on a regular basis. But that kind of stuff really kind of concerns me. So I think that she can be involved in a match. Maybe if she's not involved, or just size wise, it's tricky to make something like that work. Because I think back to like
I really can't. Right? Like as far as the unsafe goes, like I really can't comment on that. Fuck, I've never stepped in the ring, so I literally don't know unless like I physically watch somebody fall incorrectly into something, but either way, I think you're right, Parrish, in the sense that like she does almost supersede, quote unquote, needing a Rumble win or something along those lines. But I also do think if somebody's going to be presented as that dominant or be presented in the fashion that she is as a major player, eventually you do have to give them that in-ring victory, whether it's a Rumble, whether it's a singles match, whatever. I think with the Fiend, they did it too early, but you also, I think at some point did need to do it. You know what I mean? I'm going to hop in real quick here because we've got Eric hopping in with the men's Rumble winner is Seth Rollins this year. Personally, I don't see it. I think it would be really, really great if he was a surprise return in the Rumble. I just think that if you're this close, they advertised him for SmackDown, I think 2 weeks ago. If you're this close to the Rumble, I just think it means more to have somebody be a surprise return. My expectation, and I could be completely off course here, but my expectation would be that Rollins would return, declare for the Rumble, and go from there if he was to return a couple of weeks ago. I just think stuff like that is better suited for a surprise return. People love that stuff. You can never have too many as far as I'm concerned, I just think it would work better there. And I don't see him winning it after winning it 2 years ago. That's just me. I don't see a return win happening this year. Joe, Brock Lesnar is high up on my pick. High up on my list, as far as people who could win the Rumble this year.
Yep.
I'm going with Edge. I really, really, truly believe that Edge is going to be the Royal Rumble winner this year. I think the WWE may have pivoted going into Survivor Series. I cannot at all comment on what any sort of backstage booking or rumors or anything like that would have been. My gut's just telling me that Randy Orton carrying the title for the couple of weeks there means that he could win it back again in some way, shape, or form. This being a non-title matchup coming tomorrow on Monday Night Raw, if Orton wins it, I would fully expect him to potentially wrestle Drew McIntyre at the Rumble. If Edge wins the Royal Rumble and goes up against Randy Orton for the WWE Championship, I think it's a lot in the way that Brock Lesnar versus Goldberg was a couple of years ago. For me, it supersedes the championship. For me, there's the built-in story there that you don't need to have the title be a part of it. But I also fully understand the logic, and I buy into the logic completely, that why not try and make something as big as possible? You know what I mean? Sometimes it hits, sometimes it doesn't. But the work that Randy Orton and Edge were doing earlier last year, nobody disliked it by any means. The only complaint that I think anybody had was the advertising around the greatest match ever. And if that's your complaint as far as a feud goes, is what a match is called, that's a pretty okay complaint to have as a professional wrestling fan. So I'm sort of calling my shot there. I'm sort of fantasy booking a little bit. But Joe, I know you have some words. I'll let you guys close out here before we hop into Cody Deaner. But I'm calling Edge as your 2021 Royal Rumble winner.
The one really interesting thing with this Rumble too is, to the best of my knowledge, I mean, this is going to be the first Rumble without fans there in attendance. That's a huge factor to take into account here, because especially in the show, and especially these matches, the Royal Rumble matches, I mean, the fans are an integral part of the atmosphere to what's going on there. So it'll be interesting, given that there's not going to be any audience there, to the best of my knowledge. So.
110%. We're going to get to a fan question before we head to that Cody Deaner exclusive. Parrish, we had the first lady of Tag Struggle here earlier. We now have your co-partner in Tag Struggle in the comments section. Mania copping in. Where's the Sunday Brunch merch? Requesting 1 coffee cup size dad load. Winky face.
That'd be cool.
Man, I would 100% have it. Unfortunately, I am the king of dad jokes. So if you want to challenge me for that championship, you know where I live, brother. We'll see you on Sunday.
Actually, I don't. You moved.
Well, he still knows where I live. Either way, we're going to hop into an exclusive. I've got my Cody Deaner interview. That'll be dropping this Tuesday on Love Wrestling. Yeah. It's about a minute. Hope you stick around for it. He's a great guy. He's got a lot of great things to say, including what you're going to see here over about the next minute and a half. Stay tuned. And then Parrish and I, as I stumble over my words, are going to hop into some cool shit that we've got coming up here on Love Wrestling. Absolutely, man. How do you find yourself maybe staying positive or maintaining some semblance of mental stability, I guess, in an industry that maybe has been known to not be the most positive sometimes or not the most uplifting?
I would say the thing that has saved my life that way is my family. I have a wonderful, beautiful wife, and I have 4 amazing kids. So for me, being on the road for 19 days was awesome because, like I said, I'm a road warrior. But then all of a sudden, I'm just taken off the road and I'm just at home. Yeah. And I have that time. I'm like, okay, I can either focus on panicking right now and like jumping on my computer every day and like trying to make things happen that just can't happen. Or I can just, you know what, I'm shutting her down and I'm just going to play with my kids. And I was on the road a lot, man, and now I focus on my kids. I'm present more, and whenever things kind of get tough, whatever industry it's in, and people get negative, I refuse to focus on that. I mean, there's things that are more important than wrestling. Wrestling I love. I've loved it since I was 5 years old, but my family and my kids are just so much more important to me. So I could have some political crappy thing happen in wrestling, but then I just take one look at my kids and that all just goes away. So it's really focusing on those things, man, the things that really count.
Man, I love it. And I think that, like, number one, I think let's make the obvious joke here. I think the exclusive is that I've got Cody Deaner's last interview with his hair that length. I had to get a good laugh at myself, not with myself, the other day when I actually put out the advertising for that interview, because quite literally that day was the day that Impact aired the episode that Cody Deaner had completely shaved his head. So talk about your all-time backfires. But what you do there, it was an absolutely great conversation. Cody Deaner, as I mentioned, is an absolutely great individual. And the cool thing for me as part of that conversation is, I'm sure you guys could tell there, is like, yeah, there was a lot of pro wrestling talk. We talked about the Hearts. We talked about wrestling in Canada. We talked about all of that sort of stuff. But the cool part for me was getting to talk about his charitable endeavors, his public speaking, all the stuff he does outside of pro wrestling, because we talked about this a little bit last week in a very different light. But I think that people sometimes forget about the humanity behind professional wrestlers. And for me, I think that, you know, anybody watching, I hope, is pretty well versed in how good Cody Deaner is as far as his professional wrestling goes. If you haven't, tune into Impact more often, friends, because he's doing some really, really great work right now. But his charitable endeavors and everything around that, even I didn't really know a ton about until actually last year. We were fortunate enough that he came out here and wrestled in Alberta. He did a public speaking event, and getting to hear him talk and just, you know, you heard it there, but just the general enthusiasm he's got and the positive mindset. I know it's such a cliche, but there's so much more of a need for that in professional wrestling, in my opinion. So, you know, to get off my soapbox, I think that Cody Deaner's a great dude. I hope you guys tune in this Tuesday morning right here on Love Wrestling. But that's then. This is now Parrish. You may have noticed that we've changed the logo here in the top corner to feature 2 very handsome individuals. We're joined by a third non-cartoon individual, but a very handsome one there in the corner as well, in Mighty Joe. However, Parrish and myself have some exciting times ahead of us here on Love Wrestling. Parrish, why don't you give the tuner inners a little bit of background on what you and I have coming up here on the POS show?
Well, everyone, as you know, when Spencer and I were part of a deceased company now, God rest its soul, in the Wincom.
Artist formerly known as the WCSN.
Yeah. We got together at a specific establishment. We called our predictions. We perhaps spoiled some matches for everyone right before the day of every WWE pay-per-view. Now we decided we're going to remain doing that. We're going to keep doing that for everyone. So starting this year, starting at the Royal Rumble, we bring to you the POS show. And now you might see prediction or spoiler, and that's because you don't know if you're listening to Spencer, who will give you the prediction, or you're listening to me, who will give you the spoiler. But
boo! I'm
you
gonna
POS can stand for anything, whether it's prediction or spoiler. You win a match by pinfall or submission. Is it Parrish or Spencer that is going to win? But the POS show is coming back, and you know what? We're debuting the Royal Rumble. And you know what? If you want the same tomfoolery as you got back then, well, guess what? We just cranked the knob back to 10. We turned down the suck. And coming Royal Rumble, the POS show smacks you in the face and tells you to buy us a beer.
Oh man,
nice.
I am so excited because, to be quite honest with you, man, doing the pre-shows with you was always one of my favorite parts of running the WCSN, and I'm super excited to be getting to do it again. We got lots of the same, but more great stuff coming your way as far as our Royal Rumble predictions go. We're gonna have some fun games that you guys can play along with. We're going to have the debut of the Love Wrestling Elite Championship, and we can exclusively reveal here, because we make the content, damn it, we can exclusively reveal that next week on the Love Wrestling Sunday Brunch. I know some of you guys have seen it floating around a little bit on social media there, but the official unveiling of the Love Wrestling Elite Championship taking place next Sunday here on the Sunday Brunch. Now, for some clarification as well, if you guys love your Sunday Brunch fix, we're working on that there merchandise. Maniac, who I still see is so lovingly in the comments there. We're working on that, but the POS show will replace your regularly scheduled POS Love Wrestling breakfast. We've got too many initials as far as this goes, guys. We got to figure that out. But the POS show will replace your regularly scheduled Love Wrestling Sunday Brunch. You guys can tune in to Parrish and I at around noon every pay-per-view day. We'll have predictions. We'll have spoilers. We'll have Parrish. We'll have Spencer. We will have the POS show right here on Love Wrestling. Parrish, we talked about it a little bit right off the bat. You mentioned it yourself when we were talking about the Rumble. Is this the most unpredictable Rumble ever? Because for me, it's pretty cool that like the three of us had very different winners for the most part. Everybody in the comments section that was asking had very different predictions as far as who their winners were. Before we get to that, we got to give a shout out as well to Maniac, the POS show. Not bad, boys. Yeah, we're all about double entendres. We thought it was hilarious. Let's just admit it here. We popped ourselves and we went with it.
I mean, it sounds like he's saying it's a little bit of all right, but I mean, that's besides the point. But no, when it comes to the Rumble, I think the one thing we got to take into account, like last year when the Rumble occurred and that was going to WrestleMania, the Rumble occurred with fans and it was a pandemic. This is the first time where we actually have a pandemic year kind of taken you to WrestleMania. So this is going to be a very weird concept because like was previously mentioned, the lack of fans is going to take away from who the fans say, this is the guy we want. Because if it wasn't for the fans, I go back to 8 years ago, Daniel Bryan would not have won the WWE Championship at WrestleMania 30. So it's going to be interesting to see if the company or the machine, if you will actually get it right or what they will do, because we have seen in the past that maybe their train of thought, and I'll stay on this example, but Batista could be that option. But if they listen to the fans or Daniel Bryan, that was the way to go. So I think this is the one time where we're actually going to see WWE seeing if they're actually in tune with their audience. And I think that's going to be the underlining thing I take away from this Rumble, because do they get it right? Because I think this is a time where you've got to make sure that without an audience, if you want them to come back with all the other options that are out there now, you got to make sure you give them what they want. And if you don't give them what they want, put it in a way where they say, oh, this is good. Yeah, I want more of this. So I think this is really...
This is really telling. Here's a perfect example of that. I even think, and you know, obviously it's a bit of a different situation because you do have fans at the Rumble and then they're forced to do Mania without them. But I think that was a perfect example because if I remember correctly,
the fans
two
also
examples they
wanted
had-
McIntyre.
Well, and that's exactly what I'm saying is I think that this year it really is more important than ever that, when you talk about Lesnar, Joe, I'm bang on with you. I think that he would be a great choice. If you're going to do him, you've either got to make it someone with, sort of the heavy weight behind their name, like a Brock Lesnar or someone like that. Or on the flip side of that, you do have to do someone like a McIntyre, or like an example last year would have been an Aleister Black. Someone this year you could talk about, on the women's side of Bianca Belair, someone who you would proverbially call that, like, I guess, traditional pick, in that it's somebody who's going to be elevated, someone who already is a bit of a fan favorite, who already has been built a bit to be a consistent winner. The perfect example you go to is Stone Cold Steve Austin's first Rumble win, right?
That is this year for me?
At the right time. He wasn't 100%. I know that they'd already had the Bret Hart match, but I think that he was a guy who, when he won the Rumble, just took him to another level. And I think that would sort of be the flip side of what you have to do. You either got to go with like a mega star or
surprise.
Like that. Yeah.
You know who the right guy then in this scenario is? Keith Lee.
Bingo. Joe, you got a point. Sorry.
I do. A couple things on this. I had mentioned her, and Paris, you mentioned it now too. The lack of fans. One of the biggest things in this match is when the next person's coming up, we hear the crowd chanting, 5, 4, 3, and then the siren kind of going off for the end. I think what we need to do with not only with this show, but I think going forward, if we're going to continue with not being able to have fans in the audience, I know this is a bit of a risky idea here, but I think to help add to the atmosphere, since we have people coming in with video on the monitors, I think we need to find out. I think logistically, this company can find a way to make it happen. Is that you have being able to get the audio from the people listening, like have the microphone on and find a way to pipe their reactions into the show itself. Because otherwise, with that aspect of the countdown not happening, that's like one of the biggest parts of this match. And if it's not there, it's going to feel really, really strange.
100% agree, man. This is probably the biggest. This is probably the event that I have been most curious about, to rephrase myself a little bit, because every pay-per-view, at least up to this point, has been, like you say, not really as fan interactive, in the sense that, it's Survivor Series. You're not counting down every few minutes. You're not doing anything like that. You're sort of having more of your traditional pops in that. When somebody has a big move, or when there's a pinfall, whatever it may be, right? Like the Rumble is really, really built around its fan interaction in a way that no other pay-per-view other than potentially WrestleMania is, right? So I completely agree with you guys, but we've got about 25 minutes left here on the Sunday Brunch. So I want to touch on a topic really, really quick here before we show an exclusive here from our friend Zach at the Smart and Friends podcast at the Atomic Drop. I love a good pun. The Atomic Drop every Friday, Meme Splash every Monday, and a whole lot more. We're going to get to an exclusive with him, but I want to preface before we get into that a question that I have been mulling around in my old brain here. We're going to ask it. We're going to answer this fan question that Siobhan's got, and then we're going to hop into the exclusive before we start this debate. I want to talk, when we come back from break, about the Women's Dusty Rhodes Classic. Let's hop into this with Siobhan first. No fans equals less chance of the surprise entrance leaking pre-show. Everyone that is going to be on site is probably tied to a non-disclosure agreement. You know what, Siobhan, I think that is a very astute point. It is one that I can really only speculate on, to be quite honest with you. Even last year, like with Edge, it's not like there were thousands of them by any means, but there were still reports that he was backstage and stuff like that. So I am far out of my weight division as far as it goes, talking about like the actual logistics of the Royal Rumble, the legalities behind it, all of that sort of stuff. With surprise entrance, I would just have to assume, though, that, there is a less likely chance, just because it's going to sound so silly to say, but like, what if Edge last year was to drive into the building when 20 fans happen to be walking by the park, whatever it may be? There's just less chance for interaction there. So I'd have to assume there's less of a chance that any surprises will be spoiled, which is why I think that, sort of to counterpoint what you guys are saying, I think you'll probably see more surprise entrance than you maybe will in a traditional year, because you can truly have surprise entrance. I think they've done a great job with the Thunderdome. I really don't. if I was to hedge my bets, I wouldn't think that there would be any issues even with stuff like the countdown or anything like that. So I think that they will be bringing in more surprise individuals this time. We're going to be talking about the Women's Dusty Rhodes Classic when we get back from break. But if you guys want to head over to our friends at the Smark and Friends podcast, following this here edition of the Sunday Brunch, they've got some great stuff all the time. But this week's episode was particularly meaningful, not just for myself, not just for Zach. I know I speak for him on this one, but I would have to hazard a guess a lot of people in the wrestling community. I know there's been some great fan art out there as far as Mr. Brody Lee goes, and all of them do deserve their time. Check out Zach's recent editions of the aforementioned Atomic Drop article, not podcast, the Atomic Drop article that he puts out every Friday. There's some great art in there, but recently he spoke to David Speed, who did a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful neon mural, I guess, of Brody Lee in England. So here's a quick clip on why he chose to paint Brody Lee.
What is it about Brody Lee that made you need to paint his portrait?
When he died, I didn't instantly think, I need to paint this guy. It wasn't until I watched that episode of Dynamite where they paid tribute to him, that was the key. And they celebrated him as a worker, of course. They were like, yeah, he was dope. But that was like 10% of that program. Everything else was like, what a absolutely rock solid, stand up, amazing bloke that he was. And that for me, I was like, I was just so moved by that episode. Me and my girlfriend watched it. I have not spoken to anyone who didn't cry during that episode. And so we were in floods of tears, and I had a free day the next day after we watched it. We don't get it here in the UK until Friday. And ITV are so crap at uploading it. Sometimes they don't even upload it on time. Anyway, by the time I'd watched it, I had a free day the next day. I was like, because that's funny. It's like all of the other tribute art for Brody was made like instantly and on the Wednesday when the AEW, because we don't get it till late in the UK. I didn't feel inspired to do it. But yeah, it was upon seeing the man, not the pro wrestler, that I wanted to mark him. And like I said earlier, it was just a painting for me. I didn't think anyone within wrestling would actually see it. The fact that Amanda, his wife, saw it and likes it, and that it could offer a tiny fragment of a smile during what must be the worst period of her life, that to me makes it fully worth it. And I'm so glad that I spent the day up there honoring this dude. Really, it was just for me, but the fact that it's brought other people joy is just huge for me.
There you have it. I highly, highly suggest that you guys go and check that podcast out if you've got the opportunity to. They're available anywhere that podcasts are played, so you should have the opportunity to. I know that there have been a lot of great tributes to Brody Lee, and I know that, for lack of a better way to put it, everybody's had their heartstrings pulled. Everybody's a little just emotional with it still, but this is well worth the listen. David's obviously got a lot of passion for what he does, and hearing him speak about Brody Lee in a light that maybe differs from a lot of opinions that people have. He's not really a traditional wrestling fan, as you heard him allude to there in the clip. So just to hear the impact that Brody Lee has, even outside of what you would call maybe your hardcore fan, for lack of a better way to put it, really just shows you the impact that guy had on professional wrestling and the people within it, right? Now, let's move on to something a little more lighthearted. As I mentioned before we got to that clip there from Smark and Friends, last week on NXT, it was announced that the women would finally be receiving their version of the Dusty Rhodes Classic. And this is something that I think a lot of professional wrestling fans have been asking for a long, long time. But frankly, now more than ever, I think is an appropriate time to do it, just based on the high quality, not just the high quality, excuse me, but the just sheer amount of actual teams that make sense, I guess, in the women's division right now. Again, this is something I put an article out on a couple of days ago as far as it goes. There are a lot of pairings that can actually happen that should be taken advantage of as far as this goes. You know what I mean? My biggest sort of gripe, and I think a lot of people's biggest gripes with WWE's tag team division at points, has been a lot of times they will just put a championship, or they will give a lot of major pushes to maybe non-traditional tag teams. And I was doing some research for the article. 3 of the 5 winners of the men's Dusty Rhodes Classic have been these teams that have formed specifically for the Dusty Rhodes Classic. You look at even the first year, Samoa Joe and Finn Balor, the Broserweights winning it last year. And not that those are bad tag teams by any means, but it's frustrating when there are so many great alliances, great tag teams out there already. And I think on the women's side of things, there are a lot of those natural alliances that really leave a lot of great opportunities for this tournament. So I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on maybe some teams you guys want to see, maybe some teams that you see as potential winners for the first ever Women's Dusty Rhodes Cup.
Joe? Yeah, for myself, you had made a hint there, something, Spencer, with good on traditional tag teams. I think recently they had an opportunity on the men's side to form something really cool. I'm talking about Bobby Roode and his old friend from over in Impact Wrestling, Mr. James Storm. Dude, if they could have gotten those guys back together, not necessarily as beer money, but as some version. I mean, those two guys were absolutely gold as a tag team together, and it would have been really cool to kind of see them. But for me, the more interesting stuff is on the women's side, because especially in NXT. I mean, that's arguably probably the best women's division in professional wrestling right now. There aren't too many exceptions there. What I'd like to see out of this, though, is I think that there's only been one kind of flaw or mistake that I think made in this division, especially NXT, and that is how they've handled Toni Storm. They could have been printing money with their face on it as a good guy, right? as a baby face. Turning her heel, I thought, was one of the biggest missteps that they made of recently. I mean, she is clearly a fan favorite, and to just have done the turn that they did, I felt was kind of mistimed. And so I'm hoping maybe they can find a way to maybe make a change there. But I mean, it's wide open there. I mean, they have a ton of great women's talent over there. I mean, it's really, I really don't have a concrete pick there. I mean, any of them could be great.
Yeah. Parrish, your thoughts?
Well, I think this is the time now you finally do something with some of your tag teams. Like, one, I think the hidden pleasure I think we all kind of want is the reunion of the Iconics. That would be nice.
Dude, however we get Billy Kay in there, I'm fine.
Yeah. But, I mean, what was the point of bringing back the Riot Squad if you don't do something with them in terms of the tag team titles? I was actually thinking about this a couple days ago. If you were to build a WrestleMania match with the Dusty Rhodes Classic champions, the Riot Squad, going up against the tag team of Charlotte and Asuka, how much is that a David versus Goliath feel? And for the first time, I think you truly get that out of a featured women's match at WrestleMania. Mm-hmm. Because there is nobody more established than Asuka and Charlotte as competitors, and nobody more. I got something to prove in the Liv Morgans and Ruby Riots, but if they were to go in there and do the unthinkable, man, that is such a good story, and I love it in so much. And what you're doing in that process is you're giving people like Charlotte and Asuka a chance to actually help elevate other talent in that division, which I think is something they need to start doing moving forward, they as in WWE. However, in terms of surprises, I would love to see Beth Phoenix and Natalya kind of reunite for one show. I would love to see some angles kind of come out of this, whether it's a put together tag team only to split up, only then they can feud. Like, I actually like the dynamic of maybe a Carmella tagging with a Lacey Evans and they become the first women of WWE, or like kind of something like that, like the Glows version in WWE in terms of like that era, like the kind of that gimmick. And I think that's a cool little dynamic. But if we were going to see, say Candice LeRae and Toni Storm, I'd be okay with that involvement. But I agree with Joe's point that they misused her. I also hope that they take this time to actually feature the NXT UK women, like the Kaylee Rays, like the Piper Nivens, the Ginnies, who have been doing great work. And you kind of forget because they're not necessarily on TV a lot. They're only on the network. So if you don't watch the network, they're easily forgotten. Plus, I mean, we live in North America. They're out in the UK. So it's also challenging to get a hold of that stuff. And that's what I really want out of this whole thing is just feature these girls in the right way. Because at the end of it, I want to see them again. Direct me where I can see them because they are amazing. We all know this, but if you don't get to see what they can do, you won't know about them. And that's what I hope this tournament does is features these girls on a pedestal where you want to see them more.
Yeah. I don't disagree at all, man. We've got a couple of comments in here and we're getting short on time as far as the show goes. So we're going to expedite this process a little bit on my end of things at the very least. One team that I do really, really want to see in there, and you alluded to them earlier, Parrish, the Divas of Doom. I just think that you talk about teams that could come back. We referenced Charlotte and Asuka earlier, and I completely agree that their roles right now should be to elevate a team like the Riot Squad, or even, you talk about the thrown together quote unquote teams. What about a Shotzi Blackheart and an Ember Moon, right? I know I've talked about Shotzi a lot on this show, but there's just a lot of room for her to do great things in NXT right now. But I think that the Divas of Doom are a team that really could enter this, really could bring a lot of legitimacy to the tournament in a way that a lot of these teams, not as a shot, just don't. But none of them to this point, just by design with NXT, have the resume of a team like Natalya and Beth Phoenix, right? And if you bring those guys back as people who are coming back purely to win this tournament, that adds a ton of prestige to the name right off the bat. And I know that it has it because of the previous association, but you bring a team like that back, I think that you really solidify this as a tournament to watch. You know what I mean? The other team that I really, really want to see in this is Jessamyn Duke and Marina Shafir. I think we've seen them over a couple of years on NXT programming, and I think that they were in great roles for where they maybe were in their professional wrestling careers at that point, maybe helping out Shayna Baszler, but not wrestling a ton of traditional matches one-on-one or as tag teams. But right now, and it's again a gut feeling, and it's a lot of assumption because you haven't seen them on NXT programming a ton. But I would have to assume, after working with some of the best in the training world as far as professional wrestlers go for the past 3-4 years since they signed, they would be ready for something like this. And I think a lot in the way that Divas of Doom does, Jessamyn Duke and Marina Shafir as combat athletes in a way that a lot of professional wrestlers just aren't recognized as. They would bring a lot of weight to this tournament as well, and they could be a team that could really make an impact as far as a debuting team goes for the tournament. Now, Joe, I want to highlight a couple of things on your end. I want to highlight a couple of things here on the Love Wrestling end of things before we close it out here. So let's plug those all in 5 minutes or less, because one thing that I want to tear out here before we close out, it'll be a 30 seconds or less answer like we did to close it out on the show last time. Nick's got a question on thoughts on a separate TV/network show based solely around tag teams. Joe, before we get to that question and close it out here on this week's Sunday Brunch, let's get a thought on what you guys have coming up on this week's Turnbuckle Rewind.
Yeah, I've got a fun one coming up this week. We're going to go to Impact Wrestling, or back in 2005, known as TNA, Total Nonstop Action Wrestling. We were going to go to Against All Odds, Christopher Daniels versus AJ Styles for the X Division Championship. It's going to be absolutely fantastic to look kind of behind the scenes a little bit in the actual match. I mean, this is you just have to tune into. I don't want to give too much away, because if I say anything, I'm giving it away. So.
Absolutely, friend. Well, and that works perfect because it gives us a little bit more time to talk about some other stuff coming up here. As I mentioned earlier, we've got my interview coming out this Tuesday with Cody Deaner, Impact Wrestling star. Make sure you tune into that. It'll be launching at 7:30 a.m. Mountain Standard Time right here in Edmonton, Alberta. If you guys want to hop in the comments, I'm going to be there. I'm going to be answering questions live time if you guys want to check that out. This week as well, we've got Poetry of a Promo coming out tomorrow from Mr. J. He's going to be diving into the multiverse. He is going to be talking about some broken Matt Hardy. You don't want to miss out on that. He's an absolute blast, whether it's podcasting or just shooting the shit with him. You're also going to want to check out this Thursday, the same day that we're going to be launching Turnbuckle Rewind on Love Wrestling. Josh Robinson is back with his second episode of Network and Chill. He'll be diving into a match featuring the aforementioned Asuka, her WWE debut against Emma from 2015. Make sure you guys check those out. Make sure you head to YouTube, your preferred podcast player of choice, or just check us out on lovewrestling.ca. There's going to be a ton of great stuff from a ton of great people coming up, and I don't want you guys to miss out on it. It's always appreciated when you check it out. So don't forget to like, share, subscribe, retweet, Yelp review, whatever you got to do. It's always appreciated. It always does help us continue to bring you some of the best in professional pro wrestling. And it helps us keep bringing great guests into the comment section like we've got with our friends here, Eric Maniac, Siobhan, and all of the rest who have tuned in today. Nick, We've got 5 minutes left. We're going to answer your question here to close it out. Joe, I'm going to start with you because it seemed like you had some thoughts. What would you think of a separate network show for tag teams specifically in a minute or less?
I like the idea, but unfortunately in WWE, especially right now, the tag team division is so razor thin. And what they use the tag team wrestling right now is just to kind of advance these single storylines. Like you guys have both mentioned, we bring these singles acts together, but we don't build off of them as a tag team. It's just it's a side kind of bar for these singles wrestling match storylines. And until they can actually invest in the actual tag teams, I would say that this is a no-go.
Parrish, a minute or less on why you think or think not there should be a tag team network show.
Well, I would have said I would have been for this, but WWE fired all their tag teams last year. So, but then Spencer, you also know I've been saying this about the women for, probably a good 6 months. I would love to see more emphasis on tag division. However, I don't think Vince McMahon agrees.
No.
Yeah. I'll just play the devil's advocate here because why not? Let's close it out with a conflicting opinion. I think it'd be great because I do believe that between NXT, Raw, SmackDown, the NXT UK division, all of them, if you were to combine them onto one show, there is enough talent there. And I think that you even eliminate some of these so-called singles tag teams, as we've referred to them a couple of times. There's some great talent in the WWE tag team division. You look at the Street Profits, you look at the New Day, you look at the Grizzled Young Veterans, you look at the Usos. Like, if you feature them as all part of one tag team division, proverbially, I think you've got the material there. You know what I mean? Splitting them across 4 brands does, I hate the phrase watered down because it's not like they're any worse tag teams. It just does mean that for me, there are less opportunities for great storylines, for a lot of intermingling feuds. And I think that an hour-long or even a half-hour-long program on the network that specifically did something like that would be a huge, huge boost for all of them. Now, it could go the 205 Live route. It could do some great things for the few people who watch it, unfortunately. 205 Live still doing some great things on that program, but unfortunately just people aren't tuning into the amount that I think people just really should be. Really should be. There's some great cruiserweights out there, but I think that'll close it out for this edition of the Sunday Brunch. Thank all of you for tuning in. It is always appreciated when you take the time to find out a little bit more about us, about what we're doing here on Love Wrestling, get our opinions on things, and give us some things to shoot the shit about. It's always appreciated that you guys hop in the comment section. Let us give our thoughts on what you want to hear. Make sure you tune in next week. Stay tuned to our social media because we will be changing the time to make sure that we can continue to bring you all of the Love Wrestling contributors. For Joe Morin, for Mighty Joe, for Chris Parrish, and myself, I've been Spencer Love. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll talk to you next Sunday.